Randy, they started moving the stuff into the apartments.
Yay!
I could have done
That's
that.
okay.
I know. That's okay. You did. We don't need to thank you.
That's my exercise for the week.
We're doing okay. We won't expect anything more then. I saw your neighbor moved.
Yeah, he went to Wichita.
Wichita. I wondered if that was it. I
He said-
with Kathy today and I saw the for rent sign.
Yeah. He said his sister was down there. They originally talked about moving to California, but
What, now that's what they had told me. I think Kathy said they'd been moving for 2 months, and I said, well, it wasn't in California, it was in U-Haul. So I wondered if it was Wichita or in that area.
Yeah.
I hope that's a good move for them.
yeah, I hope so.
Well,
No big stories today.
okay.
I only got 3 fights, I did good. Didn't find another boyfriend, so I didn't, no, I didn't even find the one that was gonna try today either.
I think we're ready to go.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Come on.
We're waiting for the cue.
Oh, okay. There we are. We want
Yeah. So, council meeting kind of preview, the traffic control device schedule, had PD kind of drive the city and try to coordinate what's out there with what we've got on the schedule. And so we have a few places where we don't have signs, where we have things on the schedule. The plan is we'll get the signage up. But I wanted to bring up the things that we have signs for, but they're not necessarily on the schedule. Just to make sure everybody's comfortable with those. And then I got a couple other things that weren't kind of propose or discuss as we talk about this as well. So
Sid, what are you talking about when you say historic signage?
So I'm just saying historic signage, like signage that is already out there, not necessarily. So stop signs, no parking,
Oh, got you, not historic.
stop
historic.
signs,
I was-
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, not like, oh, this is a historic.
Yeah.
I guess
historic
I wasn't
landmark
thinking about
or
that when I put that word in
something.
there, but I shouldn't have used that word. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so right now we have some yield signs at Walnut and both northbound and southbound at Shawnee, that we have signage, but we don't have it in the schedule that we would update. Northbound Mulberry at the railroad tracks, there's a yield sign. And when the plan is we'll have this kind of all in a big PDF with the tables that kind of go through all this in the packet. And we'll have little notes out there like not present or not on the schedule. So Peoria Street from Miller to Hospital, no parking. There again, we have a sign, but we don't have it on the schedule. And then east and westbound Waterworks Road at the railroad stop or railroad crossing, there's a stop sign that we have there. Stop sign on southbound Rockwood at 295th Street. And then eastbound Industrial Park Drive at Hedge Lane, there's a stop sign. Westbound Heatherwood at Hospital Drive, a stop sign. And northbound Silver at Wallace Park Drive, there's a stop sign. So those would be all things that we would just recommend that we're going to put on the schedule. And what the plan is we will approve the schedule via resolution, and it'll be all one lump sum. We're not going to approve individual things. We'll just say we're approving the schedule. So any issues with those that you can think of? Okay. The other items to discuss is, west of Hospital Drive, there currently is, no parking on both sides of the street. It's 80 feet on the north side and 135 feet on the south side. And we're just kind of wondering if maybe we should extend that back a little bit further. It seems like that area is kind of congested.
Would you say East Wheel?
East, from Hospital Drive back west.
That area does get congested. When you're
Currently,
driving
it's-
to the hospital,
Yeah.
it does. Sometimes you end up with just one lane there.
Yeah.
When they're parked on
There's-
both sides.
From east to somewhere, it's no parking except special events right now. Is that right?
That's in front of the community center.
For a couple of blocks?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. And I don't, if we extended that back a little bit, would you be comfortable with that? We won't go crazy good. I'll visit with Kirk as far as how far back.
Would you still have the special events thing? I don't know if that'll
Yeah,
matter.
well,
how far
and
down.
I don't think we would extend that far west. It would just be maybe, rather than 135
Leave that
feet,
to
do like
hospital.
250 feet or something like that, so that it, just try to clear that
Yeah,
intersection out a little bit better.
Almost up to, the road that turns to go into the, where the K-State,
Oh, yeah, is
There's
that
yours, right?
Raymond?
There's just like a couple of houses back from there, they don't, but on there, sometimes there's cars parked on both sides.
Yeah, it's hard to get around the corner right there, the curve right there. Yeah.
on Braden, or on
Wait,
On Wheel.
Wheel.
But it's, I think you're right, I think it's Braden right there that goes.
yes, it is
into-
Bremen that goes into that, I forgot the name of that street.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
My only concern ever is to make sure they have parking at their house.
Well, most of
Most
them
of them
have
have a driveway.
Yeah, they all have driveways, some of them don't always utilize them, they'll
Yeah.
park on the street
Yeah,
versus.
It looks like most of them
Have a driveway,
have a driveway or share a driveway with the neighbors, so.
okay.
Maybe if it was parking one side only, it would,
Would be better at least.
you would be able to at least get through there.
We were supposed to do that years ago, if you remember. They were gonna do almost every street going east and west, one side only, and they were gonna do it in sections because they couldn't afford the signage all in 1 year, they didn't feel. And they wanted to gradually get people used to it, but then it just never got enforced.
Never happened.
But it was actually approved at one time by the council.
People just have more cars than they used to, or maybe more people living in the home, I don't know.
I think a lot more people have more, maybe a work vehicle and a personal vehicle. Everybody drives their own vehicle now.
Right.
Yeah. Two other areas are Hilltop Drive and Hillcrest Drive. And most of that is, the concern for us is snowplow, because those are kind of dead ends and it makes it kind of hard to one, get down there, and then the other to turn around and get back out with some of the parking. And the proposal is to maybe just limit parking to the west side for both of those streets. But I guess that would be another thing, is if we don't want to do that, then maybe thinking about when we plow snow, that maybe is one of the last ones we do, to make sure we do it during the day, so we've got more light than we not doing it at night and stuff. So I don't know what council's flavor is on that.
Is there a lot of parking out there on the street, a lot of vehicles?
My understanding, I mean, I haven't done an assessment of like how many vehicles that are on the street, but
Quite a few.
it gets kind of dodgy when you're trying to run a plow down
Yeah.
there.
And every one of them has double driveways all the way through there. Even the duplexes have big
You just prefer
driveways.
to park in
Why
the
do they
street.
park in the street then versus their?
Because so many people have more than 2 cars anymore. I've got a neighbor that's got 5 cars, their garage is full of crap, so they park 2 of them in the driveway and 3 on the curb.
That's the reason.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a problem out there.
Okay. And then the last one is Kaskaskia and Mulberry. Had kind of a request to put some stop signs out there to just help kind of with some of that traffic as Taylor Forge gets out. And I know that staff-wise, we're not sure that we need stop signs, but maybe at least yield signs or something to kind of help at least try to slow some of that down.
I know when they put the stop signs in on Iron and Kaskaskia, that helped tremendously. Because the guys, they get off work and they were just flying. Nobody would stop, and we have so many near misses. And the house right on the corner has, I think it's a daycare, but she's always got 7 or 8 kids in the front yard, and the fear was somebody was gonna hit one. This one's kind of bad because we've got the fence and the dye yard right there, so it's kind of hard to see around the corner, but we don't have to have stop signs, we can do yield signs for a while, see if that works. I think the biggest thing was just getting something there to help kind of slow the guys down. Because when it's 4:30, it's time to go.
And they go.
They go.
Well, we want to just do yield signs for now, and if we feel like we need to revisit that, there's still an issue, we can come back and do stop signs. Okay, any other questions on signage, traffic signs? Seems like that's a fun topic, everybody just water and wastewater master plan, we received 2 proposals. We're going through those, and we'll probably be visiting with those firms this week, but we anticipate still having a recommendation by Tuesday with one of those firms. Any questions on that?
Was this something that was decided months ago?
The water and wastewater master plan? Yeah, it was, I mean, it was part of our budget discussion. We've got money budgeted for those.
Is there a problem? I mean,
Well, it's more of a trying to get good planning done so that we have, and that part of this is to help us develop a CIP, a capital improvement plan for those utilities. Because we know that we have older infrastructure, and we also know where we have problems, but sometimes, yes, the idea of the plan is it allows us to have professional engineers to look and evaluate our system, and there may be things that when we go to put in a project or try to fix a problem that we know we have, there might be an easy way that we could fix 2 problems or 3 problems rather than just the one. And so part of that is for that kind of coordinating those capital improvements. Another part is for when we have future development, when somebody comes and say, we want to put housing development here, we know what it's going to take to get water and sewer to that place.
Does this will also tell us the size of the infrastructure, will that do that too?
It will help, it'll
Some of
help
those
too
kind of
that,
all over town.
hey, if we need to replace a water line and we've got a 4-inch there, it may be like, hey, you know what, if you're gonna replace it, you probably ought to put a 6-inch, or you may need to put an 8-inch there, just so that we're making smart improvements when we're doing those.
was there money set aside for this or
Yes.
just?
Yeah.
You know how much?
Yes, We have $100,000 for water and $100,000 for sewer,
Okay.
for wastewater. Any other questions? Lake Mila Dam, the geotechnical investigation. We only received one proposal. I have been exchanging with our engineer, McAfee Henderson Solutions, who helped us develop the RFP and who did some of the preliminary assessment out of the dam and who recommended this work. They reviewed the proposal and feel like that firm can do the work. I'm gonna call a reference just to say that I did and cover that base, but I'm not as familiar with the geotechnical firm that proposed on this, but they're pretty well known out there, so.
And this is primarily for the sloughing problem we're having on the
Yes.
south side on the top of the dam, and that the other work that we'd already had done that we didn't realize we had to have permanent, that's already been approved by the state, correct?
So the way that stands with the state is they know that work has happened, and what we will do is we will do this geotechnical investigation. That will help determine what exactly we need to do for our next stabilization project. When we go to permit that stabilization project, we will kind of get a back permit for that other work that we
Okay.
did. And the state's all, that's kind of how the state told us to do it. Just
Okay.
kind of apply for the permit at that time instead.
And then it covers everything.
And that
already
covers
done.
everything. And then we can get the dam in better shape than what it is, so.
Is that holding what we've already had done? That's okay, what we've already had done.
Well, as far as the state is concerned, we are good at this point. I think part of this investigation and the further work to stabilize the dam will be to ensure that the dam is stable for years to come and not continue to have issues. Any other questions on that one? Another item that I want to bring up that I think we'd like to maybe move forward on is 401 East Kaskaskia. That's the house. We've talked about that. There is an active building permit for that house based on they had some engineering. We had requested them to get some engineering done and get a plan for improvements. They got a building permit. We also gave them a letter that you have June 15th is your deadline to get this work done. We have not seen any movement on that. And so Randy and I have been talking, and the thought is we would go ahead and come to council with a resolution for the condemnation process and set up the public hearing for June. And that way, if there's no movement and they miss that deadline, we can start moving on the condemnation side of things. That's already going to be set up, and that way we're not messing around with this anymore.
And then the city tears the house down, or they do?
Well, I think they have 30 days to tear down the house themselves, and if they don't, then the city would do it, and then it would go on their tax roll
For that property?
for that property.
I would be okay with that because we've been talking about that one for a long time now.
Yeah.
It seems like it's just dragging out, and I'm all for,
About 6 years.
yeah, I don't want us to have to pay to tear it down, but I'd rather be ready in case nothing happens, and then we just have a public hearing and go forward like we've done with it. Because I think we've been pretty lucky with the last two. The one actually got torn down, and the other one, where Anthony was living, we got that one taken care of.
Yeah.
Somebody bought that, so
Somebody bought
yeah. So,
Actually,
yeah,
Yeah.
but then that way we're ready in case nothing happens.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what, if we had been seeing some movement, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion, but there hasn't been any movement on the building permit. They've had it for probably almost 2 months, so,
It's like they buy the permit to keep it active.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not likely we're gonna see much movement between now and June 15th, so.
How much would it cost to tear a house down like that?
I don't know what it would be here. I know in Iola, we were paying between $3,000 and $4,000 a house. So,
Well, that's not
That's less
bad.
than I thought it would be.
I was about 20,000.
'Cause I was thinking when we were talking about the one on, I was thinking it was closer to 8 or 9, but maybe I'm wrong. But I was thinking it was less than 10, I can't remember.
It depends on the foundation, and the one on the, I don't think was very stable. This one I know has a old rock foundation, I think will be a little more expensive, so it just depends on the construction. If it's a bungalow, probably not much, but.
There's no structures close to it, which probably helps.
Yeah. So maybe they could sell the lot, or somebody build on there.
yep. Any other questions with that? Another item is transient guest tax. I know that we've got to work through the transient guest tax committee that oversees those requests, but with the Roots canceling it, there may be some, I know the chambers with their fireworks, they would like to, we had cut their fireworks from 6,000 to 4,000. I think they would like to have the 6,000 because their fireworks were even more expensive than they planned this year. So, but we'll kind of work through the transient guest tax committee. I think is probably the best way to do that, and then maybe have something in council to approve some amendments on that end. Any questions on that?
I'd like to see us help the chamber board, because I know we used to give them a lot more than what we give them now. And they really haven't lost that many events. And so it's tough on their budget to come up with it every year.
Well, and that was one of the ones that took a big cut. I mean, that was 33% of that, what they requested, so. Anything else on that item? Code, so we've talked about this, we've been trying to get the code so that it's on an online searchable format, and we're pretty close to that. We've got some revisions back, and the hope is that we can get all that finalized and have an adoption ordinance ready for the meeting on Tuesday. That basically just says, hey, we've kind of moved to this format. We changed the chapters, so the chapters are a little bit different. The city code has kind of a common chapters that a lot of the cities in Kansas utilize, and so they took our code and put it into those chapters. So chapter 200, which was animals, will be a different chapter in code, but that code will still be in there. So
Speaking of codes, where are we at on updating our building codes to a more modern one?
right now, and we've had that discussion. We're kind of working through the comprehensive plan, and we've come out of that with kind of recommendations on where we want to be with building codes as far as what addition. If we want to move that conversation up, we can.
I think we should, because we talked about having it done by this time last year. And it would seem like we're procrastinating on it quite a bit. And ours is pretty antiquated.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got the same version that Osawatomie has, and Lewisburg is newer.
Lewisburg's updating theirs, we have the same as Miami County and Osawatomie.
Because we had talked about that and talked about, I thought we had talked about doing it through Janet and having Janet coordinate a meeting with builders to talk about, I thought that's what we talked about.
To have it more uniform.
Right.
Yeah.
And to talk to the builders to see what their recommendations were, but I agree, we probably need to do something.
Well, yeah, so with that, I know that Lewisburg, I think they've already updated theirs, but I know that they went back and made revisions to their updates because they went further than they wanted to or something.
Can we get a copy of those and see how they compare?
Yeah, we can. I guess that's where I'm trying to look at staffing, our ability to get this done. Because the idea, I've been working under that, hey, we're gonna work through the comp plan. The comp plan's gonna say, hey, this is kind of probably where you need to be. Your building codes are 2006. You probably need to think about updating to at least 12 or whatever, and then working to do that. But if we want to do that, then we're going to have to kind of shift gears a little bit as far as when we do that and how we do that. We might, because that takes a lot of work. I don't know, have you thought about that?
No, because honestly, I thought I was on contact with you, we put it as another component of the comp plan so they could guide us on, especially with downtown and stuff like that, they could say, we think you need to go to this building code for this one. So I haven't done any research on it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we tell, like, I forget what the name of the hit, and B&B, that we would be looking into it real strong and probably doing something within the next 6 or 7 months?
And I told him, he came back and I told him that we have a section in the comp plan for it, that after the comp plan that we're gonna work through it and they'll give suggestions.
But our comp plan's not gonna be finished for more than a year, probably.
Correct, but he's come back to me since then, we have communicated that to him, he's well aware.
Well, I understand that. What I'm saying is, we're procrastinating more and more. So if we're gonna wait till after the comp plan now, it's gonna be at least 2 years from when we originally planned on it.
And I guess I'm trying to line up some of this stuff strategically so that we have some guidance as we make those decisions.
And I agree with
And otherwise, we have to go out and maybe either dedicate a lot of staff time, which is something that can be done, but it means that other things we have to think about, okay, where are we gonna sacrifice to concentrate on code update, or we have to go out and find somebody else to help facilitate just the code update, because
So why can't we, like we originally talked about, contact the county and contact Osawatomie, because they haven't updated yours, have a couple meetings with them and do it as a joint project where we split the load?
we can do that. I wasn't aware that was what the process was gonna be, that I recall.
Has the county finished their comp plan yet?
No, it's actually on hold because they're working through the Golden Kansas thing.
Okay,
And so their comp plan is, and that's where,
because I thought maybe, I didn't think theirs was finished, but I thought maybe they had found something maybe that we could use that would help us.
and I can visit with Osawatomie, but they've got a lot of things in the irons in the fire with trying to work through water and wastewater concerns and things. So, but we can, I guess, what does council want? Do we want to get the codes updated as soon as
It's
possible?
all that bad, really? Do
I was
they have a
gonna
hard
say,
time?
that-
Do they have a hard time dealing with them, our builders? Are the things that's so bad that we need to address immediately, or are they? What do we hear from the builders when they come in? Do you hear a lot of complaints?
Well, I mean, I only hear the bad, I'm gonna pull that out there, but I don't hear if it's fine, I only hear the bad. So,
Tell us what the bad is.
I mean, like, I only hear people that complain, because, I mean, we give out permits every day, but the louder voices are the ones that complain.
Are they the same thing, though, that they're complaining about, or are they different ones?
New houses, we don't hear much complaints about, maybe commercial.
It would
But-
probably be the remodels and,
Yes.
okay, do you hear the same complaints on the remodels?
That would be more, I don't know the specific ones, but the
Okay.
specific codes that come out, that'd be more of a bill question,
Okay,
but we can look at that.
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the whole reason we started talking about this to begin with was specifically because of Scott and Matt wanting to open up their bed and breakfast and the requirement of the current building code that we
But
are.
that was a fire thing.
Right, doesn't separate the fire code from the residential for bed and breakfast. And if we were on a newer version of the code, they would get an exemption and they would be able to open up. So we started having the discussion to say, okay, where are we? Where's everybody else around us? Shouldn't we be with everybody else and have the county and all the cities in the county be at the same? So everybody's pretty familiar. And I think we reached out to Janet McRae and she was gonna set something up with some of the contractors and stuff, and then COVID hit and everything got put on hold. So if that's if that was the primary driver, we definitely need the comp plan, and we definitely need to get that done. And there are certain things that we've already preloaded, like the sports complex and whatnot, that we need to get done. So if Scott and Matt are okay with holding off, which I think they are, I think that all kind of died down for now. If they're okay with holding off until then I would be okay with saying, okay, we just leave it on.
Who was the one where they had a bed and breakfast?
Scott Chappelle and Matt,
Matt,
Oh,
on our advisory.
He's on the
committee.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
on the
okay.
advisory
We
committee.
put him on there to help drive that.
okay,
So
okay.
he's on
Great.
there.
We
Okay.
really don't have.
Our comp plan advisory committee.
We're on 2006.
No, it's all residential building code. And
Right,
the fire, and that's,
what.
right, and that's what drove the whole
We
process. So
don't
if
have
that's,
a code in there to address that.
right, and they wanted a specific exemption, which, looking at it, we couldn't give an exemption because then that makes us liable.
They want the exemption for what?
To not have to put sprinklers.
Sprinkling systems in.
Right.
Well, and I didn't know until that time that it's not unusual to have older building codes. Because I started looking around just different communities. I think it's just whatever fits best.
Whatever it works for your
Right,
community.
and I didn't know that until then.
So that's why I'm saying, if we don't have a very big problem there. maybe we're
As far as
okay, then
sprinkling
we can all
systems
get
go,
on.
or what?
Just the building codes update.
Building codes in general.
Yeah, I'm not against updating them,
But no, not against updating them, but maybe the push isn't there as much as it could be if we had something there for bed and
I mean,
breakfast.
I
But
know
if
we,
they're okay right now with it and understand, then,
Well, I think there's some problems with the business buildings around the square. They don't feel like they can afford to put sprinkling systems in. And is it a state? Does the state tell us that they have to have
in the fire code,
Yes,
it's
the
life
fire
safety, it's a life safety issue.
from the city, from our fire marshal, or from?
From this, what, the fire code that we have is what dictates what the requirement for the sprinklers. And I think that's where trying to have the comp plan address codes, but also have that conversation with downtown to help are there some ideas that allow us to not necessarily compromise the life safety part of the fire code, but get more use out of the buildings in the downtown area? Because there may be some things that we're not thinking of, and some approaches that may be more of a hybrid type of thing that maybe is out there that other communities have tried. But that's part of why trying to have Confluence help us through that process.
And personally, I think the electrical upgrade would be better than, I think that's more of a worry than the sprinkling systems. If you have an old building, the electrical
Yeah.
needs to be updated.
Well, and I think the requirement for the sprinkler is also, I mean, some of that I think gets tied into your ISO rating. And if you're not using sprinklers, then the ISO rating for that area may be higher.
What is that?
ISO, it's the insurance rating
That's
for
what
fire
drives up your
protection,
insurance costs.
which drives, and so there's kind of a balance there of where we can be and want to be and may need to be, that we kind of need to work through.
well, like I said, I think it would be different if we just had a ton of complaints and we were much older than we are now. And I know they need to be updated, but
Or people not building here right now because of them.
But we give out new permits for new homes.
Well, I think there are complaints about some of the buildings that own Park Square. I think there are people that own businesses, buildings that would maybe open up apartments upstairs if they didn't have to pay for the sprinkling systems, which is probably gonna be $25,000 to $30,000.
And some of the newer codes are a little more lenient in that way than the older codes are. Because they make things, I think, even too stringent, too fast on some stuff.
Well, and some things will be more stringent, and that's where that's where kind of weighing, like, do you want to be at 2012 or you want to be at 2015? Do you want to be at 2009? I mean, you probably don't want to just go 3 years, but you may not want to go to 15 or 18.
And who's getting punished for that? You're talking about that, the insurance number, our number.
Citizens, so if the city,
Your insurance
Fire
rate,
insurance costs on their home.
your insurance costs.
In
Based
all of
on your
them,
ISO.
every home and they
Yeah.
all of them.
Yes.
and see, that's another, that goes into another thing with even the water master plan is, to take a look at fire flows. Are there places where we don't have adequate flow that if we made some improvements, maybe then that helps, and that further helps drive down our ISO because we made that modification. So it kind of all ties together.
Yes, it does.
I can't remember for sure, but I feel like Lewisburg went to 2012.
I was thinking so.
I think they did, but I know that I had a conversation with Nathan Law, their administrator, and he was going back through a bunch of that because I think they just adopted 12 and then they realized that they didn't want all of 12. And that's something that I would want to be careful of is
Yeah.
when we know we're adopting whatever we do, we have it lined out that, okay, we know the consequences of
I
that.
know that's what you want.
Right. Any other questions on that?
So what have we decided?
Well, I thought I was thinking the consensus was to work through the comp plan.
Well, we drive to the company.
That's a year away.
If we honestly are gonna get it done after that. I'm just frustrated that we plan a lot of stuff and then don't get a lot of it done.
Well, I feel like
We move it back more and more.
I feel like we're on track with our projects that we had lined out for this year. With the comp plan and the master plan, the geotechnical for the dam, and realize the geotechnical for the dam, we're kind of out ahead of where our funding is for that. Because we really don't have the money for that project, but we can do that project utilizing some other funds and then pay ourselves back from the sales tax revenue that we have coming in December.
Well, I think the dam's important.
Right, and that's why we're trying to get that work done now, so that as we talked about in the fall with the sports complex and the pool, when we're trying to do a bigger project and have something that we bond out, that project can be part of that bond, so that we can get a lot of that work done sooner rather than having to wait into as a pay as you go for some of those bigger projects.
Well, I think the building code was one of the first things we talked about a year ago, like you were saying, right before COVID hit. And then we just put the brakes on it, because I think we were gonna try to work with, I think I remember,
Right, because the whole thought process was, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had.
joint meeting and stuff, and then we couldn't meet together.
Right.
As part of the problem.
Right, because they had a conditional use permit that was good for 6 months, is that right? And we were hoping to meet and get something done in that time. But like I said, because I think that was that was one of the primary drivers for that, specifically because we found out that we were different than other people around us, we had the same, so I think that's what started that.
I have a question. Why can you not address that particular code with bed and breakfast without overhauling the whole thing?
Well, you can, but the only way to do that, if I understand it correctly, the only way to do that is to make an exception for that specific instance of the
Can you not
code.
just look at that particular section and decide if you
Well,
want to
In my opinion, the
maybe
issue
address
becomes,
the bed and breakfast issue?
but if we do that,
If I own a business building in town and I wanna renovate it, and I know there's an exception over here, I'm gonna use it, I'm gonna ask
No,
for it.
Leanne, I'm not saying an exception. We have nothing in the code, do we, Randy, that addresses the bed and breakfast, do we?
it's the,
Yeah, we
It
do.
requires membership.
right, and it's part of it's based on the International Residential Code, which refers you to the International Fire Code, and the fire code version that we're on specifically requires sprinklers for the bed and breakfast.
Right, and I
And
did that.
we could
And the
say,
fire flow, but they never did, are they going to have a check to see what the fire flow was, or what that line was, or something?
Supposedly,
but even then, they still have to have sprinklers.
Yeah.
The line
But
size,
they did
the
not ever
line
have that
size,
test done.
right, the line size makes a difference whether they can just have sprinklers or they have to have a holding tank for the sprinklers.
Right.
And the biggest issue in talking with, because I talked with several individuals at the state and in Johnson County as well, the biggest issue with that is if we would make an exception for that, and something were to happen at that property,
Right.
technically the
No,
city
I'm
would
not
be liable
saying make an
because.
exception, but
Right, yeah, that's the only way we could do that, would be to make an
it's
exception.
kind of a piecemeal thing, but I thought, well.
Was Shipman's Liquor gonna have to have a sprinkling system? Does anybody know?
I think that would depend on what the use is.
Yeah, we didn't
Right.
even know what exactly we used there.
If they were gonna try to have apartments upstairs, probably yes. If they were just planning on something in the main level, they would not have.
Because I think part of the deal is that it's kind of lumped in with hotels, if I remember right.
The bed
When I
and
looked at
breakfast.
it, yeah, when I looked at it a year ago, or however long ago it was, I think that was part of the problem.
Where the newer versions of the code
Yeah,
look at bed and
it
breakfast
wasn't,
separate from.
bed and
hotel.
breakfast are lumped in there, and they're not as separate
Right.
items.
In the older codes.
Yeah, where the newer codes separate those out and make it more.
Those bed and
residential.
breakfasts, they're popular now, back then they
Right.
were not.
And part of the problem in our city specifically, some of our older parts of town were never meant to have, I mean, it was residential, single-family homes. So this infrastructure would not support the flow.
Bed and breakfast.
Mhm. I learned all kinds of things from that.
What was you were reading? What were you reading
I was
from?
reading about the holding tank, because they, I think if I remember right, they were gonna have to have a holding tank, because our infrastructure won't support.
That's why they
Your
told me,
information, I mean,
but that's why they told them they had to have the test done on the
Mhm.
pressure, the water pressure.
Right.
To see if they would have to have a
To
holding
see if
tank.
they would have to have a holding tank.
But the reason the pressure wouldn't be there is because it was never meant for anything other than single-family residence.
That's right.
Right, so more than likely, it would have passed, and they would have required a holding tank, which would have been an additional
It was a lot.
20 to 30.
Are they even wanting to still do a bed and breakfast? I know they're working on their home, but they
They
live
said that,
there.
they said as of right now, they're remodeling it as a single family home.
Mhm. That's what I thought they would,
In the future, they said they'll look into it again, once we get.
as they move forward. Yeah, because they're working, doing a lot of work down there on it. Looks very nice. Mhm. It does look nice.
Anything else on that item? I'll visit with Janet and see what her thoughts are, where the county is on potentially updating. My assumption is they're probably waiting until they get done with their comp plan process, which now, like I said, is on hold at least for a little while. But if not, we can see what we whatever it takes to get a joint meeting together. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, the 2022 budget process, I tried to outline a general timeline of what this would look like. So the legislation passed Senate Bill 13, which basically kind of replaces the old tax lid and now has the term we will use is the revenue neutral rate. That basically the idea is that we cannot exceed the revenue that we levied last year without going through a special process. And that special process then has a different path than your normal budget. If you're not going to exceed the revenue neutral rate, you kind of follow this existing timeline, which you're trying to get to August 25th to get your budget to the county. If you're going to exceed the revenue neutral rate, you follow a different timeline and you have to report to the county that you're going to exceed that. It's not a requirement this year, as I understand it, but next year, then they are required to send out notice to all the property tax owners to say, hey, Hale is going to exceed their revenue neutral rate. Then we have to have a special public hearing to say that we're going to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and then we have to have a public hearing to approve the budget. That end timeline is October 1. My hope would be is next year when the legislation would meet, that they just make it one timeline and it's October 1 is the deadline, whether or not you exceed it. That way it would make it a lot simpler.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that you can have both of those public hearings on the same day as long as the revenue neutral rate hearing is first, and that's closed and approved, and then you have the budget hearing, and the whole reason that we're doing that is the legislation thinks that we're not being open enough about raising taxes or raising our revenue. So they want to make sure, and this is kind of a driver to do that by sending out mailers, like you said, it won't happen this year, but next year they'll be sending out mailers to everybody that's
So
affected.
everybody knows.
So everybody knows, trying to drive people to the public hearing. Sid and I talked about this earlier, and I think the difference is even if we don't think we're gonna exceed the revenue neutral rate, I think we're in agreement that we need to tell the county clerk that we're going to and hold that public hearing anyway, because if you say you're going to exceed it and you don't, it's not a big deal. If you say you're not going to exceed it and then you do, not only do you have to pay that money back, but there's fines on top of that for doing that. So
But
it's
isn't that a
safer.
perception to let your citizens think that you're going to raise their taxes? But isn't that a perception? And once they hear it, they're going to think that's what happened.
Well,
I do not think misleading people is correct.
No, I don't either.
I think it's
I'm not,
I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to say that, I'm just saying that if we think that there's a possibility that we will exceed that, we need to
Shouldn't
know.
we have an idea before we get that far?
well, basically, you're gonna have to make that decision, is it by July 20th?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you
it's
are-
And
have
you
any
have
idea?
between June 15th is when we get information from the county
Okay.
about what our valuation is. We have then, by July 20th, we have to then give notification to the county whether or not we're going to exceed that.
Where our valuations are higher, our mill levies are gonna pretty much probably go down or stay.
Yeah, they're gonna, if
So
as the
we'll-
valuation goes up, your mill levy will
So
go
we'll have-
down.
We'll have some leeway.
Right, we'll have some
We
leeway.
should be able to keep within budget.
Well, I would think so.
Well, you won't, if you try to do anything above, so say this year, just as for 2021, we levied $1 million of property tax across all of our different funds. That means next year, we can only levy $1 million worth of property tax. I don't believe there's any sort of, I haven't seen anything about a inflationary escalator or anything like that. It's, so forever moving forward, we can only levy $1 million. So if prices of things go up, or we want to institute a different program, or we want to pay for a project or something like that, we're going to have to go this route of exceeding that revenue neutral rate.
And that's why I was saying, it's not, I'm not saying we mislead anybody. What I'm saying is, if we think there's a possibility, it's going to be better to say, we think we're going to exceed that revenue neutral rate, and then at the end of the day, come back and say, you know what, our calculations were close enough that we don't have to exceed that, but we at least go through the process of having that public hearing, because if we don't, and then we have to exceed it, then it becomes expensive for us.
Right.
Is that when they send out the mailers, when you notify them that you're gonna possibly?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you notify the county then
in July.
sends
sends it
out the mailers. Do we have to have the date of the public hearing for that? Do you know? Or do we, we just have to tell them that, I mean, that mailer will just say payola is gonna exceed the revenue neutral rate. Okay.
On here, it says, you don't have to have the, well, if I'm reading it right, in August, like, deadline to submit paper.
Right,
Isn't that normally when we have the date by?
right, but I didn't know if that's for the,
For normal.
The
normal,
one? Oh,
the
yeah.
normal,
Yeah.
the budget hearing. But we didn't, so technically, we would have, if you're gonna exceed, you have, as Trent was saying, you have to have 2 hearings. Revenue neutral rate, hey, we're going to exceed, discuss that, close that, and then you can go to, I think you have to pass a resolution, is that right? If
Yeah,
you're
for
going to
revenue
exceed.
neutral rate, and then you can open a public hearing for the budget.
So the first hearing is just basically saying, we're going over.
What we
We're
did.
going to go over our, we're
Lots,
going
please.
we're going to exceed the
But the
amount
nice-
of the $1 million.
Because
But
then the next
Don't you
hearing is
think you're
actual
gonna have a
numbers.
better idea before that? I mean, I can't imagine.
Well, I think we can, but I think then we kind of get locked, we do get locked in that if anything comes
We
up.
always have been before, like when there
No,
was a tax.
They changed the law just a couple of years ago, and
Yes.
League of Municipalities hoping that the legislature will change it differently,
But they
because
have,
they haven't so far.
but
Didn't
you
it used to have to be up for a
can't
vote
Well, and see,
before?
and,
The
and
tax lid?
with the tax lid,
Yeah, the tax.
Yes,
exceed.
there
That's
was
what I
a-
was trying to.
there was
think
a
of.
vote, but the tax lid also had language in there for exemptions for public safety and escalators for,
Right, this,
for new construction and to
Right.
account for all
This
that.
doesn't have any.
This doesn't have.
yeah,
any.
that all, that all
They do
goes
not have
away.
any of those exemptions.
No.
As of right now,
Right.
it's basically, there's no,
So basically, if we added, it's my understanding that if we said in July, okay, we think we're gonna exceed the rate, and the mailers go out and we have to hold a public hearing. Well, definitely by the public hearing, we're gonna know, because we're gonna have we could have the public hearing very close to that for the actual budget, so we're gonna know. And if that's the case, then at the public hearing for the revenue neutral rate, we just say, all the calculations that come back, we're not going to exceed it. So,
Okay, but by the same token, if we do that, then aren't we locked in for the next year or whatever we have this year?
right. Yeah,
So, I mean-
it gets a little bit that you don't want to go under the $1 million, because then next year, if you did $900,000, I mean, it's the same thing with the tax lid. You didn't want to, you didn't
What I'm
want to.
saying is the opposite way. Say we're going for, we think we'll stay at, we had $1 million this year, we'll be okay with $1 million for next year. But, so we want to say we exceeded, so if we don't go ahead and exceed it, then aren't we still locked in at that $1 million?
For next year.
Yeah, we would be locked in at
Yeah.
whatever we levy.
So whenever we know like a year ahead of time, we can then automatically want to exceed it under this current system. Right?
Say that again.
Okay, so we don't think we're gonna need more than $1 million this year, so we spend our $1 million like we did last year. And then next year, we're locked in for $1 million.
Mhm.
Can't we ask to exceed it at budget time next year?
Yes.
Following year?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can,
So if we
you
know we're
Yeah.
gonna do something.
So it's an
then,
every year
we can then
process.
can, yeah,
exceed.
you can, each year you can,
So we're only locked in 1 year.
yeah, you're just 1 year at a time.
Every year it can change.
I mean, I'm just thinking about,
Every year we could actually ask for more for the next year, not for the current year.
Right, for the next.
I'm just thinking about, hopefully they'll change it, but I remember when the insurance the health insurance rates were so crazy for a while, and that was one of the reasons that had an exemption, you would have to exceed it just for that.
Yeah.
You know, 6 or 7 years ago, so I don't know how they're gonna be,
Yeah, it's either you plan on exceeding or you've got something else.
right?
Mhm.
So that might be very confusing for people.
So with that, we have budget workshops with the state later this month, so hopefully there'll be more clarity on what Senate Bill 13 means for us. I don't know that, anyway, so that's still in the works, but we've got this timeline, and the idea is that on July 6th, at our work study, we would do departmental presentations, so.
Which we were gonna do last year, but we couldn't.
Any other questions on the budget?
Our sales tax is good.
Yeah,
Well,
it's-
That's part of it. That's part of,
Positive.
I feel like that's part of the frustrating part of it all, is you can't levy your growth to pour back into it without all this.
well, I think sometimes we're trying to fix a problem that maybe doesn't exist too, is because we have a public hearing process.
Right.
We are we have to be very transparent in our budget process. And I don't remember that anybody came to our budget hearing last year.
I don't think
And
it
so,
was ever come.
They rarely do.
I don't
And
think
so-
it's ever come.
One year, we had one lady come, and she came to meetings, yeah.
Yeah, no,
but, so that's kind of where it's like,
People don't pay attention to the get their tax statements.
Yeah.
Really, until you're faced with the dollars and cents in hand.
They don't pay attention to the water bills till it goes up.
yeah.
I know, but really, when you start talking about all that percentages and things, you don't do all that, and it affects you when you get it in the mail, and it affects your checkbook.
Mhm.
Right then, that's when you say, oh, no.
I notice it every time I go to the grocery store. Things are high.
Any other questions on budget? American Rescue Plan Act, that acronym will be ARPA. So with that latest stimulus, local governments have been will be given allocations of relief funds. Those amounts are still being determined because they're still trying to count all the cities and towns and villages and everything. We have some ideas of what our allotment will be. I've sent in on 2 different webinars, one from the state of Kansas and one from the National League of Cities that was done with the League of Kansas Municipalities. And like I said, I kind of got the same information, but they don't have a whole lot more information, and we're still waiting on guidance from Treasury on one, what the allocations will be and how this money can be spent. The estimated allocations for the city of Paola is over $800,000. We will get half of that here in 2021 and another half in 2022. The nice thing about this, we have until December 31 of 2024 to spend it. So we don't have to,
2024?
so we don't, it's not like the CARES Act where it was trying to get you down, spend it to zero by the end of last year. We'll have some time to spend it.
Is there guidelines as to what it can be used on?
There is some broad guidelines of what it can be used on, but specific, like, hey, we want to do this project, can we pay for it with these funds? That kind of guidance hasn't been out yet. What?
Yeah, no kidding.
To reuse it on the dam?
No,
COVID broke the dam.
I
Too much
don't,
traffic.
well, so one of the main things, that some of it is to offset, lost revenue that, was seen because of COVID and maybe dips in collections and stuff. There's maybe a little bit of that we could capture, thinking kind of with the community center. But I don't know that that's what we want to do, because that may be, we're also going to want to try to do this in the least amount of, we don't want to do $5 at a time, because I'd rather try to figure out what's something big that we can say, okay, here's our one expenditure, it covers all that.
What would be an example of something like that?
So some of it, so there's the replacement of revenue, there's a couple different things, but the thing that is probably where the biggest amount of money that you could do is for necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. There is a lot of argument and debate about, well, what about streets? But right now, it does not say streets, and the guidance has not been streets. And as Eric from the league said, I would not go out and redo a street and think you're going to get this paid for with this money, because you probably won't be in the right on that, at least right now. So water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure are some of the things. And so now with that, there's also money coming to the state that they will distribute for different programming, education, childcare, businesses, healthcare, housing, transit will all get some of that state money. And transit, and I'm not sure how that fits under there, but that also includes broadband connectivity too. And so there may be opportunities that for some of these things that our money could be utilized for an expense, and we can also kind of build upon some other state money to get a really nice project going too. So trying to wait and see what comes of the final guidance. I know that they talked maybe that later this week that some of that might be out, but I have not seen anything as of yet. And like it says, water and sewer infrastructure, but I don't know if that means, that may not mean every project that you think you're going to do in water is eligible, because there may be stipulations on it has to meet this kind of criteria as well. So. Any questions on that? I was going to give an update on the comprehensive plan. We talked about the advisory committee. They met on the 21st of April. We kind of got to know each other and did just some preliminary kind of visioning type of stuff as far as review kind of what was some of the goals of the 06 comp plan, and kind of what we saw as concerns with transportation or housing, and how do we make sure this plan is something that can be implementable. That's the word.
Sounds good.
So that anyway, that they are scheduled, I think, to meet potentially on the 24th of May. We got the survey was released on Friday. I know there was a couple issues with the age bracket and one reference on the questions, but that's all been fixed. That's been shared via Facebook. Brian is going to have something in the paper this week. It was shared out to our advisory committee, and we've got some paper copies at City Hall, at the library. I wanted to visit with Leanne. Maybe the Historical Society might want to take some paper copies of that survey, just
Is it
in
on the
case.
city's website?
It is on the city's website.
I couldn't find it. I went to the city's website, tried to find it the other day, and couldn't find it.
Well, we got that up yesterday, I think.
It's on the front.
Yeah, and under news.
Okay.
On the front.
Yeah.
I had it every,
The city website.
finally found it on Facebook.
And we've got we're gonna have some other Facebook posts later this week and try to continue to spread that information out to get as many people to respond as possible.
Have you had many responses?
I don't know, I haven't, talked with Chris at Confluence to see what they have. I know that we kind of talked, last week that we touched base and kind of see where the survey was. Probably will run through the 17th of May. It gives it a good full 2 weeks, and then that gives them some time to review the results and come up with recommendations for the June 1 meeting, which the plan is they will be here or either via Zoom or in person to talk about recommendations for the ball fields, and kind of the Wallace Park area, what the survey kind of says. And then we will be kind of still on pace for, after that discussion, is then the council having a discussion about, okay, where do we want to be with the project in July and August, and then potentially then kind of having a plan, spending plan developed by them, so that then by the fall, we're going out and getting a project actually up and off the ground.
Did you make any changes to this survey from when you first handed it out to us?
There was some changes, yes.
Were they just minor,
Yes.
nothing major? It was a good survey, it was general and easy to follow.
I would say, I think it got good traction because within an hour it was up. Lee called me saying, we're missing the age group. So that was good. Then it got out that quick before already taken it. So that was a good indication. Hopefully.
It was probably the age
Okay.
group with the most traffic, I would say.
Yeah. So we got off the horn real quick to get that.
It was one of my friends, she goes, I just went younger. So she said she was 36 instead of 41. So, and you just said the timeline, I just have, after visiting with people this week, I think it's important that we, and Sid and I've already talked about this, stick with our timeline, hopefully, unless some crazy thing comes up.
You mean
For the
May
ball fields.
17th?
Hmm?
May 17th, you mean?
No, like trying to get that meeting in June, get our spending in place, get decisions made, still be on pace to start on it later this year. I think that that's been a concern that's come up in the last few
You know, as
days.
long as they're good decisions and we
Mhm.
move forward, you know,
Right.
you can't make a decision if you need a little more information or something, but you have good intentions of moving forward.
Has there been any consideration taken to the fact that the ball field floods? Was there anything on the survey about that?
Well, I did not end up putting that on the survey because I felt like that was, I think people had the opportunity on the survey to make comments about the location and the questions and any concerns that they had about the information in general. And so that language was not specifically used on the survey. With that, I worked with two different engineering firms and have finally got information back from one of them to kind of provide us a scope for geotechnical work and survey and environmental screening of the Wallace Park area. And so the one firm that proposed on the dam work, I've already asked them and shown them that scope and said, okay, quote me what it would take to do this work on top of the dam, with the idea of hopefully maybe with them already having to mobilize to get here, it'll be a little bit more affordable. And then I'm working on trying to get the environmental screening survey scope in a form so that we can solicit those services.
They're gonna figure out how it won't flood down there anymore?
That would be that information from those two studies would then be utilized to say, okay, this is what it would take. If you want to build down here, this is what it's going to take to build down here, or, hey, it doesn't make sense to build down there, or, you know, hey, you
They
don't
know
have.
it floods.
Yes, everybody,
You know, it runs so far.
yeah,
When it happened.
You know, you got a flood.
They know.
down there.
What they're, if you listen to their plans, what their plans are, all the canoe complexes will be out of the area that's ever flooded. They'll still need all those little fields that flood, and they'll have to fix them up after they flood each.
And how many fields are you talking about that aren't gonna flood anymore?
Or,
well, I think they were, my understanding was those were gonna be built up.
yeah,
They thought they could build them up out of, I would assume it to the 100-year flood range or something.
but the new ones wouldn't flood. The old ones, they were gonna try to build some, like land dams or whatever you wanna call it.
And that's stuff that these studies will help us, because that's when you start, there's a difference between a floodway and a floodplain, and I'm not as familiar with the nuance between that language. But sometimes if you're in a floodplain, you are restricted on some of, like, building things up, as far as, like, if we were trying to, we'd have to do a lot more permitting and stuff. But those are things that all this engineering is gonna help us try to decipher, so that when we get to the point that, hey, we have a project that we wanna try to build, this is how we can build it, and whether or not it's buildable there.
Will we have any information back for June by then? I know it's a month away. So like say the survey comes back, and I haven't talked to a lot of people about it, but my guesstimation is a lot of people are gonna want it to stay where it is, if it's possible.
Yeah.
So would we have enough information to say, okay, since we gave people the option, do you like it here, do you like it here? Will we have enough information to say we can move forward?
I think, I'm not sure that we'll have enough geotechnical stuff back. I don't know.
Being realistic, we're
Good.
not gonna put that many fields in Paola.
Right.
Down there.
Right.
Where we have land available.
Well, anywhere, we as a city do not have land available. There's potential areas that something like that could go.
I know, but not within the city. Is
Well,
it?
yeah, there are.
But
Out by out by the high school where they got their ball fields.
First of all, two people own all the land out there, and they're both
The
sliding,
city doesn't
I know
know
that.
and they're not gonna sell that
You never know.
or
But we
donate
don't-
it either
Not
way.
for what we want to pay for it.
No, because they can make, if they ever sell it, they plan on putting it in real estate for housing, because they'll make a killing on
So the city overall does not have that much acreage available that we would need for that, do we, other than
it.
there?
One place you might have the acreage would be like over at, behind the cultural center, that pasture and stuff is the only area that's big enough.
First one property.
Yeah, there's certain.
But that's owned by,
That's owned by.
that's
Right.
somebody.
But that's the only place big enough in the city limits.
Then you look at the fields and then you gotta have parking and things to go with it, so that's where you're going to come up short.
Well,
All the lights,
and
all those
creek,
lights right there.
and you've got the
With
three
all
cars
that
in the property that
residential.
you've got to deal with too, so.
So being realistic, there's not another place within the city.
Right.
They'll have to move out into the county and then maybe the county would do it. They're wonderful.
yeah,
Don't see that.
Yeah.
There was nothing on that survey about a sports recreation commission either.
correct. Because it was more about facilities. That's a question the idea is that question will come up as we go through the comp plan process.
This was something we kind of added to get this addressed.
Yeah,
And
I-
that
I
would have
think-
to go through with the school board too.
Yeah, I think
It'd have to be an initiative, so you have the school board taxing area versus just
I
the
think
city.
anything about a rec commission at this point in time will probably really muddy the waters.
And it would be a little.
And trying to get anything done, that would make it difficult.
Just from rumors I've heard, if we get the fields, I'm pretty sure we'll get a reclamation shortly after.
There's been
With
people
the
waiting.
school system.
Yeah,
But they have to, yeah, they have to be on board with that, because you gotta have that package.
Like I say, just the rumors I'm hearing,
Yeah.
if this passes, the school board is ready to go.
Because then we'll have facilities and different things that before it didn't really make any sense. So now it's all, well, part of the issue was facilities before, part of the issues was there's too many hands in the pot, and that's kind of all. Fix this up a little bit, I think.
I think you'll see one within the next 2 years, if things go right.
When do you know, if this group, you said they might look at it, or you've asked them if they would look at it also?
Yes,
And we're voting on them for the dam next week.
yes.
And do you know when they would be here for the dam? Or when they would be here?
I don't know, I think, trying to remember their proposal, I think they can mobilize pretty fast.
Okay.
But that would just depend on how fast we got to them. And
Okay,
I did speak to the engineer who wrote the proposal and a little bit about the ball field stuff. And so, and they are the company that did the work for the one that Mammoth provided us as a kind of an example guidance.
Okay.
They're the company that did it for that other community, so
Okay.
they're kind of familiar with that kind of work, so.
yeah, and I have to remember their drawings that they had, the flooding was gonna be parking or something else, not a field.
Most of Big Russell was out of the flood zone, they was going over that, get it out there, Big Russell.
Yeah.
How much are they gonna charge for that? Out there at the lake, that RFP, that,
That's $66,000.
is that what you said, we didn't have that in the budget, but we do have it?
What is that?
That's for the geotechnical investigation at the lake.
In the dam,
Oh. But we do have it.
We have money that's available that we can utilize to do that project. And like I said, it would just be something that we know that we can pay it ourselves back.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Mary Carson about being able to do that, so that we can try to get this project, because otherwise we really don't have the money.
And we really need to get that done.
Yeah.
We've been kind of piecemeal it every year.
Yeah.
And
Because we use stormwater, do we use stormwater funds for it or?
I think, yeah,
Yeah.
stormwater. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's how we paid for the other two. Actually worked out there.
Anything else?
There we are.
How are we coming on, the numbering of the buildings around town?
That, I have, police did a survey for us and I've got that information back. I haven't looked at it real closely. I know that we had what I got back from them was 138 properties that were either labeled or clearly being able, or visible or well within the code. Everything else was fine. So that's
not very many.
It's not.
Consider how
That's
many
a very,
properties we have.
pretty small percentage. When you figure we have, what, 2,400 water connections, so roughly we have about that many.
Yeah, that's.
about 2,000 of them are correct.
No, the way I got their information, they had 138 that were bad.
Oh.
You said it, yes.
So less than 2%.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, less-
738.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, you said it just the opposite.
Okay.
Oh, I know, I thought you said
No, that's what I
138,
took
it wasn't properly numbered.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, 138 are need to.
You need to be.
need to have-
Yeah.
Neither need numbers.
My bad.
Yeah.
So about 6.5–7% maybe.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
It's actually better than I would expect.
I can find most of it. Trust me.
Do you think we'd send out letters and?
Well, that's something, like I said, I haven't really, because one thought was, if, you know, if we had 600, 700, 800, how do we address it not to use the pun, but address it one way versus with this 138, I think the idea would be, my thought is we'll probably just try to send letters to those addresses. Those are easy enough that we could probably kind of track those. It makes a lot more tracking, but I mean, that's somewhat manageable. If we had 1,000, we'd have to kind of figure out how else we do that.
How's the new code enforcement working out?
I think we're doing all right.
Randy says, good job.
It's,
I know,
it's
right?
nice to, when we have somebody email in about an issue, we can now have somebody that's designated to go do that.
So I can start emailing now?
No. Yeah.
What's his name again?
Keith Myers.
It'll be at the next council meeting, everyone.
Well, I should wait a because I think it's Bill, so.
I was over there.
Oh, yeah, he is in Bill's truck.
I know,
Go in,
I know. Oh, wait, he said no Bill's truck.
He did
Yeah, he
say
said
that.
Bill's truck, I'm like, wait, oh, I forgot that's on Bill's.
He goes, Bill gets tracked down a lot. People that follow me, they think I'm Bill. I was like, I'm
Tell him I won't ask for his favorite author.
A quick comment about the lake. I think I've seen a lot of people out camping. A couple of issues that we probably need to address is down by the no wake sign on the regular camping. People were camping all weekend long with tarps. So they had probably 10
What do you
vehicles.
mean tarps? They had tarps.
They had
and
stakes and
trees?
tarps, and they were camping all weekend. And there was also
No
canopies for several days on at the dam on the west side. So probably ought to address that. But otherwise, I saw a ton of tents on the upper camping area. I've been watching, I haven't seen any refrigerators or appliances plugged in at the lower camping area.
So
But
we're
just
just,
the one area, when you first come around the corner, it's the lower camping area, where there's the last camping spot from there to the
To the
buoy.
south.
Yeah, to the south. There was quite a few people out there, and they had stakes and tarps out, and they were obviously camping underneath the tarps.
and then the other area was.
It was on the west side of the dam, just south of the dog park. That little parking area down there, they had canopies up there, and they were down there all weekend long.
That's not even a camping
No,
area.
it's not, so.
We're gonna put you in charge of the lake.
So they're,
I can do that.
they're putting up tents
What you gotta do,
where they're not supposed to.
you gotta do is.
Not even
Trick.
tips, just make it all.
Have they done that
Yeah,
before?
yeah,
I should have looked at it.
That-
that'd be great. I'd take
I'm
a
saying,
match.
I want to have what California's got.
Can I have
You
one
can do
bullet?
Bill's
Just
truck.
one
No,
bullet?
no, Barney. Barney can't do it.
Okay.
Barney side.
I'm gonna get a salary.
That's poetry.
No. But I'll email you.
We'll give you a ticket book.
Sid, I have a question.
Okay.
We didn't own the land underneath the cultural center,
Correct, but we do.
but somebody said they gave it to the city.
For $1.
Is that right?
Yes.
The new owners.
That was done before, I'm assuming that was the new owners and not the first one.
It was
Right.
the first one that gave it to us.
For $1.
The first one did, okay.
Yeah.
When it's for $1, they sold it to the city.
Probably, yeah.
So we've got that and the land, the sidewalks are under and a little bit of land around it, because that was.
It's, yeah,
A
it's
little
like
bit.
right to the back sidewalks and then sidewalks on the side.
And don't we
So
have
we
an
need-
option for parking too, if we decide to go?
Oh, that's another,
That's a whole other issue.
We did before.
yeah,
We did, but, yeah,
I don't know if that was more verbal, I don't think it was.
it was
in-
verbal.
I think that was more with Round Rock too.
I was gonna say,
I'm trying to get set up to meet
that
the
group.
current owners, so
Are they ever gonna do anything?
trying to get,
The right
just
forward.
visit with them about,
I
They,
said the right
Yeah,
forward.
probably.
There's 3 of them.
they
there.
had,
There's who's over
they
there?
added on to that.
Hmm?
Who's over there, they added on some of that.
Four wheelers, there are four wheelers.
The 3 owners?
I don't remember those.
And they're just patrolling over there?
I don't know if I would call it patrolling.
They're four-wheeling?
Yeah, so, I don't know if they're doing that.
They won't let people come on there.
Nobody knows
Well,
what they're
no, I
gonna
knew
do.
they wouldn't, but when you said they were with four-wheelers, I don't believe it.
Looked like they're just having some leisure time.
So you can go on the property, you just need a pass for four-wheeler than what they.
Yeah,
Because originally, didn't they tell us they was got 3 different projects, they was gonna start this
Three
one,
different owners.
and then they were gonna do the second one,
Well,
and
each-
it was
each
like a
owner
3 or 4 year plan,
Mhm.
and they haven't done anything, have they?
They fixed the barn.
Now the barn looks nice.
Yeah.
Well, when they originally came back with plans, they had apartments all along the creek, and I mean, it was just a,
on the
they
gas
took
line.
a Google map snapshot and said, okay, we're gonna put apartments here.
I think it was on the gas line too, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And they fixed that little house up, that little ranch house, they remodeled it.
I'm kind of think they tried to
sold
sell
it.
it.
I don't know if they sold it, but it was for sale,
Yeah.
so I don't know. There was some,
And the
People would have
K-State
to-
people moved out there.
yeah,
So that building's vacant now, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are.
Anything else?
Sounds like you're lucky we're done.